And thank you for joining us. Let's start with that Senate, because US President Barack Obama seemingly getting the political backing that he requires.
I think if there's one thing that all of the lawmakers agreed on last night, is they agree on what they called a restrained, limited response to take out certain capabilities of Bashar al-Assad. And of course, I think the precondition to that is they do not want boots on the ground. So you will not find American troops there, at least the way things stand now, and you most definitely will see something coming, the lawmakers agreeing to what they call a limited response, which would be physically pan out to tomahawks, cruise missiles, something of that nature, which they of course would direct towards Assad's forces and so forth.
What would be the purpose of doing that, and is it as simple as just going in and then literally carrying out those punitive strikes for a day or two and then leaving?
It's definitely not that simple, because we know with these strikes, first of all, from a pure humanitarian perspective, and it's irrelevant of who does the killing, whether it's Assad who's allegedly killing, or the rebels who are allegedly killing, or whether it's the US who will go in and have collateral damage. From a humanitarian perspective, you cannot open up the discussion and the engagement to say we accept killing of anyone, wherever in the world they may be. So definitely we'll see a lot of casualties. And the issue is, what does that then do to other entities in the region? What will Hezbollah's response be? What will Iran's response be? What will Assad's response be? So once you start that engagement, a military engagement, it is not easy to predict what the outcomes will be. It's impossible to predict what the outcomes will be. And we've seen failed interventions in other parts of the world. So I think there definitely is good reason for concern over any type of foreign military intervention in
Let's go back
Syria.
to the issue of proof of the use of chemical weapons, because Russian President Vladimir Putin has come out now and said he's now challenging the US and its allies and saying, come with the proof and then it will justify a military intervention. What do you make of that?
I think if we go to what Prime Minister Cameron tried a few days ago, that totally failed in his own parliament. And after the US's sexed up dossier on nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that Colin Powell presented to the United Nations, after that, whatever proof the US brings becomes highly questionable. And unfortunately, you would only discover whether it is real or whether it is fake 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the line. And I think from a realpolitik perspective, the issue is really trying to understand what will the responses be in the region should there be a US strike. And I think the US probably, if they feel there's enough support within the G20 meeting today, they probably will go at it alone with 1 or 2 or 3 allies from Europe and in the region.
If they go ahead, what is likely to be the response from Bashar al-Assad's government?
I think Bashar al-Assad has been entangled in a civil war for going on to 3 years now. Without a shadow of a doubt, his resources are getting depleted. It's very difficult. You cannot expect a type of outright retaliation. You do have Hezbollah who are sitting in Lebanon. There might be some pressure on Israel that might play out there. Iran, of course, has also made it clear that they will not sit still. So the problem is, this could potentially spill out into the Gulf. There are US targets in the Gulf, US targets in many other parts of the world. You don't know where this will end up. And
now President Jacob Zuma is attending that G20 summit tomorrow. Let's touch on South Africa's position and also the position of regional powers.
I think South Africa, of course, in these positions, our government has been very clear. We are almost on par with Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's position regarding the unilateral strike on Bashar being internationally illegal. South Africa definitely supports that. South Africa has also been very wary from the beginning to just take it for granted, that we need to be into the business of regime change. And it's very important to mention that because Bashar al-Assad in 2011, when this issue started, already opened the door for negotiations, the door for engagement and so forth. And there seems to have been a very clear position taken by international powers to isolate him and to stop any attempt to engage with him. And I think that is, if you look at what made South Africa work, was the fact that we included the apartheid government in whatever happened post-1994. So South Africa really has this deep understanding of how to bring about a transition. So when you try to isolate Bashar al-Assad at the beginning of the event, which we call Ground Zero in 2011, you really started you started on a path of destruction, and now it just becomes who holds on to power. And the situation in Syria is not as homogeneous. So it's not Bashar al-Assad against rebels. Who are these rebels? Who are these forces? Who controls who? Who controls what? It's very difficult to quantify. And so once you remove Bashar, if you should remove him, you create a power vacuum. So it's not like one army that's going to take over and run the government. You really don't know what you're going to end up with internally in that region should you oust Bashar.
Thank you very much for your time and insight.